Qiskitters. In this video, we're going to talk about what you need to know to get your code merged into one of the Qiskit repos. So this is after you've forked your repo, after you've made your changes, you've done your tests and your linting and your documentation. This is the final step to actually get that code merged into the Qiskit main branch. So first of all, let's start with this setup. Alice, she has done making changes to her new branch locally, and she has pushed any of her features to her origin version of Qiskit Terra. So her origin Terra is completely up to date with any changes that she's been making locally. So now if she goes to her Qiskit Terra repo in her account, she can see that she recently pushed changes to her new branch, and she can click compare and open a pull request. This is exactly the same as she would have done if she was just collaborating on her own repository with other people within her account that we saw in a previous video. And again, similarly, she can go into her branches tab and look at all of the branches available, and again, click the new pull request button here. But before she does this, she needs to have a mental checklist to make sure that she's done everything that she needs to do before opening a PR. And this is also relevant for you as well. Have you checked that your changes address everything in the original issue? If you selected an issue to work on and then you made some code changes, did you actually fix the problem that was originally mentioned in an issue? Or if you didn't, if you just were making a new pull request, you had no extra kind of issue you were attaching it to, you don't need to worry about that. Have you run all of the tests on your local machine and made sure that nothing is broken? Have you also written any new tests to cover any extra code that you have added? Have you tidied up your code? Have you removed unnecessary files, any comments or print statements? It is good practice to add comments into your code, but make sure that you haven't left any extra ones that aren't actually needed. Have you run the linter and done any of the formatting that you need to do? And lastly, have you added a release note if your change is user-facing? If your change is just updating documentation and not any functionality, or if it's not changing anything that a user might feel the impact of, then you can ignore that point. You don't need a release note. OK, so now back to Alice. She has clicked open a pull request, and this is the page she'll get taken to. This is very similar to what she would have seen if she was just doing it collaboratively in a shared repo with someone else. But the main difference here is that you can see in her comparison, instead of comparing, like we saw in a previous video, to her own account, her own repo, she's comparing her Qiskit Terra repo to the Qiskit Terra repo, the Qiskit Terra repo that lives in the Qiskit GitHub organization. And she can also check that she's comparing her new branch feature to the main branch. And this is the default setup if she clicks that open pull request button in her repo. It will automatically take that branch in her fork of the repo and compare it to the upstream main branch. Everything else is pretty similar. She should add a title that is kind of succinct and self-explanatory for what she's doing. If she wants, she can open her pull request in a draft form, so she doesn't have to have everything be perfect. If she wants to make something that's a bit of an earlier comparison, it's not completely finished yet, but maybe she wants to invite more comments and questions earlier on in the process, she can do that with the drop down and select Create Draft Pull Request. The section in the middle is what's called a pull request template. This was set by the Qiskit Terra repo itself, and it provides some guidelines here on what she should be adding to her description. Those guidelines are here to help you, so make sure that you are paying attention to them and make sure that you're checking off things on that checklist as well. The last thing, which is a general GitHub feature and is really, really useful, particularly in the Qiskit Terra repo, is if your pull request, if Alice's work is going to fix a certain issue, she's looked in the Qiskit Terra repo, she wanted to work on a specific issue, and her pull request is addressing that issue, she can reference the issue number in her description of her PR, and she can use the special syntax fixes and then the hash symbol followed by the number to select the issue. And this is quite clever syntax that GitHub uses. So it will then automatically link that issue to this pull request. So that means that if Alice's PR gets approved and it gets merged, then that will automatically close that issue that it's linked to. So it saves the maintainer's time. So it's really helpful to do that. But make sure that you're using the exact phrasing to get that connection to work. Once she has opened her pull request, she will have a layout that looks like this. Again, very similar to what we have seen in previous videos in our collaborating episode. Reviewers can leave comments. They can go to the Files Changes tab to look at a diff, a comparison of the files, of the changes she'd made. And if Alice makes any changes to her branch, she can push them up, and it will, again, just like a regular PR, those changes will be reflected. So if she pushes anything to her new branch, they'll get added in here, and they will automatically show in here, even though this pull request technically lives in the Qiskit Terra repository. A couple of extra things, though, that she will see on her pull request, though, that lives in the Qiskit organization, is this box here, which talks about testing coverage. And it's provided by Coveralls, which is an automated bot that basically will print out information for you about how much of the code that you've added has been covered by tests. So in this particular example here, we can see that someone has added a couple of different files, and it will show you how many lines are missing, how many lines of code in those files are missing tests, and then an overall percentage for how much of that file is covered by tests. And this kind of updates, this box will kind of update automatically every time you make a push to your branch. So you can look here and then go make some changes, add some more tests, and then push again, and then these numbers will kind of automatically update. It's a good practice. You want to aim to have above 80% test coverage. That's kind of a good thing to aim for. And if you click into that box, it will take you to this view in the browser where you can see line by line which parts of the file are covered by tests and which ones aren't. So in this file, for example, we can see that a lot of the file is covered by tests. There's a lot of green things, but there are some red blocks here that Coveralls can see, oh, there's been no tests to address the stuff here. In this example specifically, you can see that anything that raises an error, so a backend property error, has not been covered. And this is a point that we raised in one of our earlier videos. When you're writing tests, make sure that you're not just testing for that happy path. You're not just writing tests to cover the main functionality of your code, but you also want to write tests that cover the errors, because you want to test that if a user does something wrong, gives the wrong input, that an error is being raised when you're expecting it to. And the last piece of advice that I have on coverage is that good coverage doesn't necessarily mean that you have good tests. So you should avoid writing tests just to bump up the coverage. But it is a metric that can be helpful to give you a general idea of how you're doing testing-wise. OK, next up in your pull request, let's talk about this big box at the bottom. If you watched one of our previous videos, we talked a little bit about this. This is the box where it tells you oh, the branch is out of date or it needs updating. But in Terra, we have some extra stuff here with all these kind of tests that are going wrong. If you see all of these big red issues, it's important not to panic. The sky is not going to fall if you open a PR and you have a bunch of red, test failures. You haven't broken anything serious. Don't worry. All that this means is that when GitHub is running tests against your changes, things are breaking. You probably don't have permissions to push anything that's going to seriously break stuff in Qiskit, and your mistakes can probably be undone. So just if this maybe looks scary when you first see it, but just remain calm, and we'll show you how to approach this if you do see something like this. OK, so before we go into more details on that section of our PR, let's just take a moment to discuss what is CI/CD. CI/CD stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Development. It is a very common process for large software projects like Qiskit. And it is a general term that can refer to lots of different types of automated tasks. And that's kind of what is somewhat summarized here in this box that we're going to go into a bit more detail in a bit. And in Qiskit specifically, we use CI/CD every time you make a push to an open PR. A new CI build will trigger. And what this build does is it automatically runs a bunch of different tests on your code in various different environments. So that could be using different versions of Python. It could be running tests. It could be checking linting. It could be checking things in different operating systems. There's a whole bunch of things going on there. And because there's so much going on, it does take some time for your CI build to run. That's why within your PR, sometimes you'll see it, it takes a while for the results to complete. And that's because there's just so many tests that are getting run. And also, it's running for every PR, every push to every PR within the repo. So that can sometimes cause a bit of a queue to form. So if we go back to this box at the bottom of our pull request, let's talk about a bit more what's happening here. So first up, we have this section at the bottom. This might be already familiar to you if you watched our previous video, but this is just telling you that the changes that you've made in your branch, in your feature, are not up to date with what's happening in the main branch. And because you're merging into main, you need to make sure that those things are aligned. So it's normally pretty easy to just click Update Branch, and the GitHub UI will show you what's going on there. But just remember that this will update your remote origin branch. If you want to see that updates being shown on your local machine, then you're going to need to pull from your remote origin again to get those changes locally on your laptop. Next up, we have this section in the middle here. This is if you're seeing a bunch of red X's, that means that some of these automated tests as part of the CI process have failed for your branch. And so what you're going to need to do is to check out, click the details buttons to see what's going on here. So let's see what's happening. Normally when you click those details, you'll get taken to this view within the GitHub platform. You can also, on the PR, automatically navigate to this tab on the checks panel. And what we really care about is this bit here. It says that there are 5 errors that are causing the CI to break for this PR. So if we click on that, that will then take us into this new view where we can see some more data for what is changing, what has gone wrong in our branch specifically. So the things that are the most important are probably this line here and this line here. You can click on either of these to get into a bit more information about what is actually going wrong. So bash exited with code 1 is not very self-explanatory, but if we click on it, we'll be able to see some more details. So now we've clicked on one of those red X's. And this will take us to this view where we can see a log for all of the CI processes that are running. And what exactly failed. So normally there's a whole long list of checks here that you can see have gone, and a lot of them have gone right, but this one here where they're running the test has gone wrong for us. And then if you look through the logs panel, you'll be able to see, okay, it's errored because of this reason here. This is the line in this test step that has gone wrong. Sometimes these logs can be quite long and quite difficult to wrap your head around, so you might need to scroll through a bit, or maybe even do a Command F and search for where the error is specifically. Once you've identified the error, then you can go back to your code, make your fixes, push, the CI will re-trigger, and you should be able to figure out what went, to make the CI pass this time. 90% of CI errors that we see in Terra are something that you would have also got if you had run the test locally yourself. So that's why it's always important to run your tests and run your linting on your own local machine before you push up to the upstream repo. Very occasionally, there might be a reason why the CI build fails and it wasn't because of something in your code. Maybe something has gone wrong with some versions of different packages in Terra itself, at which point you're gonna, normally one of the maintainers will push a fix to that as soon as possible, and the issue will resolve itself. If you are reading through these errors and you're not sure what really is happening, you can Google it. A lot of these, like for example, this one is an attribute error. This is a very common Python error. A lot of things can be fixed with a quick Google, and you'll probably even learn something in the process. Also, occasionally you might click into your CI and you'll see this error, build not found. If this happens, that means that the logs of your CI build for your pull request have been deleted. Because we run a lot of CI builds for a lot of PRs, we can't store those logs for eternity. I'm not sure the exact cadence at which we deleted, but I think it's after a few days, the logs will automatically get deleted. So make sure if you have opened a PR that you're checking in on your CI, pretty regularly. Otherwise, your build log might disappear. And lastly, sometimes even if your CI isn't failing, in that box at the bottom, you might get a notification like this that says that some of the work that you've done is conflicting with some of the work that was already in main. All this means is that you are trying to change some line in your code, in your Hello World file, that someone else had also already changed in the main branch. So what you need to do is compare those two different versions and see which ones you actually want to keep. And this kind of merge conflict thing really just prevents you from accidentally overwriting someone else's changes or letting someone else's changes accidentally overwrite yours. I personally like to resolve these conflicts in GitHub itself because I think that the user interface is quite nice and it nicely highlights things for you. So I'll click the Resolve Conflicts button here. Which will then take you to this nice view. You can see, okay, this was what was changed in my branch, this was what's in main, and then I can manually remove or add different lines depending on what I want. I could also do this locally in VS Code if I wanted to. If I pull and there's a merge conflict, I just sometimes find it easier to do it in the GitHub UI. But you should feel free to use whatever process is more comfortable for you. So once I have removed any of the lines that I didn't want here, now what I can do is I can say mark as resolved, and then this will then prompt me to commit any changes that I've made, which I will do, and I'll click commit. And then hopefully, if all goes well, then that means that my CI is all good to go. The CI check's passed, the branch has no conflicts, and it will have logged that kind of resolving of conflicts in the commit history as well. So if something went wrong, I can just go back to that previous commit, see what I did wrong, and change things. Again, remember, if I was changing anything in the GitHub platform itself, that is only going to update my origin version of my branch, so only the stuff that lives in GitHub. If I want to have those changes reflected on my code on my laptop, I'll need to pull from my origin. So then once everything is all good to go, you have the nice green tick and the nice green buttons, you can then merge your pull request into the main branch if you have permissions to do so. In Terra, the majority of contributors do not have permissions. What you'll need to do is get a maintainer to review your code, and once they have approved it, then they can merge it themselves. And that leads me to my last point, which is in the code review process, if you're making a contribution to one of the Qiskit repos, there are a few things that you should keep in mind. The first one is to be patient. Maintainers have full-time jobs and weekends and families, so please don't expect instant responses on GitHub or Slack. It's normal to have to wait for a bit to get a review on your work. If you haven't heard anything in about 2 weeks or so, it's perfectly okay to politely ping a maintainer to remind them to review your code. You can do this on GitHub or on Slack itself. And always remember that the better the quality of your PR, the easier it is for our maintainers to review it, and the quicker that it will get reviewed and merged. So make sure that you've been paying attention to everything I've been telling you in the past videos. All of these things will really help you make a really good quality pull request that is more likely to get reviewed and merged quickly. And remember that all pull requests must meet the quality standards and the style conventions set by the core team in order for it to get merged. This isn't a Qiskit specific thing. This is an open source general thing. If you are suggesting something to get added into a project, you need to comply by the standards and the quality expectations that the owners of that project are setting. And lastly, you can review other people's work as well. There are a lot of pull requests, a lot of issues to work on, and maintainers don't always have the time to pay attention to all of the things that are going on at once. But you are very welcome to go and help other contributors, help review their PRs, help them if they're struggling, and yeah, just enjoy being part of the open source community beyond just committing code yourself. And there we have it. That covers the final pieces that you need to know once you are contributing to Qiskit to actually get your code merged into the main branch. Thanks very much for watching.